Hello, Gen Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some even more exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
As you know, Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast. All patrons get early access to new CutOff Genes episodes before they're released to the public.
But the most exciting new perk is that all of our patrons will be able to listen to an exclusive bonus episode of the podcast every other week. Topics include personal stories that I'm not ready to share publicly, conversations with family and friends.
And sometimes we'll devote an entire episode to other subjects we love, like musical theater or classic television.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Genes podcast, and it would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/cutoffgenespodcast.
Thank you so much, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show. Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon-Jackson. I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. Julie, I've been out of town for the holiday, for Thanksgiving and all of that. So I've been.
Where did you go?
Oh my gosh, I've been to Santa Barbara, which was lovely. Yes.
Lovely.
And then that was before Thanksgiving. And then I was home because I worked on Thanksgiving, as I usually do as a pianist. And then I went to Palm Springs for a couple of days.
Oh, cool. I did too.
Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
I did. I wish I worked.
Oh, really?
I like working on holidays.
It kind of, I will say, as much as I complain about it sometimes, it does sort of remove you of the obligations that the holidays, puts upon you.
Holidays get more and more stressful for me the older I get. And, I have the luxury, I guess, of having most of my extended biological family, at least, being in another country. Mm-hmm. So, that makes things easier in a lot of ways. I have to tell you.
But your kids are here.
No, yeah, my kids are here. And, of course, my husband's family is here.
Yes.
So we usually go back and forth between his father's side of the family and his mother's side of the family.
Right.
Now. And we did his father's side this time. It was lovely. It was actually quite lovely. It was small and intimate and pretty enjoyable.
Well, I remember when my mom was alive, I always worked, and she worked on Thanksgiving too, but yet my mom still wanted to have like the family gathering. So we would meet at like 11 a.m. for our Thanksgiving lunch. And then both of us would each go to play the piano. And,
right.
But it was super stressful because you have to get up so early and then do that and do the family thing and then go to work. And so, although I miss my mom terribly, I don't miss that, having to do both of them on the same day. That was a lot. So
what did your husband do when you're working on holidays?
Well, as he puts it, he loves being home alone and watching television because he is a vegetarian. And he says he always hated Thanksgiving because he would sit there and listen to everybody talk about a dead bird on the table.
Which is not appetizing for a vegetarian.
No, especially when they pull out the giblets or whatever,
Oh, and the innards.
The stuffing, right? It was, So, it was a win-win. Let's put it that way.
Good.
Now that we've gotten the turkey out of the way, let's try the turkey of this podcast.
And a turkey it will be.
No,
as Bette Midler would say, eggs will be laid tonight.
I will be the ham on this turkey.
Of course you will. All right, let's start off with something rather light. So a few weeks ago, you coined the term, I wonder if what was it? I wonder if the Roundheads were related to the fat face.
Oh, my God. All right. I love that I coined a phrase. Yes.
Yeah, you did. You've coined many. So of course, the Roundheads, I was referring to somebody who did something to St. John the Baptist in the ruins of the church, my family church in Chester. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking out.
I was going to say England, but you could be a little more specific.
England. Yes, a little. And I was reading basically off the Wikipedia, and they talked about at some point, in the 12th century, the Roundheads did something, which of course then prompted you to invoke the fat face, because I had spoken of recently on that very day going to a store called Fat Face to get a cardigan because I was cold. So I was thinking about the Roundheads a lot. And of course, as is my way, I needed to know why they were called Roundheads and what indeed is a roundhead. So I went to the trusty old Wikipedia. And here is the explanation for the Roundheads, and it really makes sense after a while.
And then you can explain the fat face.
I don't know if I can, really. Okay, so Roundheads were the supporters of the Parliament in England during the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651.
Okay.
Also known as parliamentarians, they fought against King Charles I of England and his supporters. King Charles I was beheaded outside of the banqueting house in London, and by A. Cromwell. And there were a few years where there was no not aristocracy, but the royal family was not in existence until it wasn't working. And so his son then became king and quickly disposed of Cromwell. Anywho, so they fought against King Charles I of England and his supporters, known as the Cavaliers or Royalists, who claimed rule by absolute monarchy. And the principle, monarchy was the word I was trying to think of. Yes. And the principle of the divine right of kings. The goal of the Roundheads was to give to Parliament supreme control over executive administration of the country and kingdom. But why were they called Roundheads? That's kind of more interesting.
That's because as opposed to squareheads.
SpongeBob SquareHead. Okay, some Puritans, but by no means all of them, wore their hair closely cropped round the head or flat. There was thus an obvious contrast between them and the men of courtly fashion who wore long ringlets. During the war and for a time afterwards, Roundhead was a term of derision. And in the New Model Army, it was a punishable offense to call a fellow soldier a Roundhead. So they basically had tightly cropped hair as opposed to the larger, more luxurious hair.
So you think it was more like a bowl cut? Like a Dorothy Hamill?
No, I think even closer. I think more like a crew cut.
Oh, okay.
Actually. Yeah.
Wow.
Like they didn't have razors, so I think probably more like mine, really.
Oh, it's kind of like a cute bob.
No, like a pixie.
A pixie.
They were like men with pixies.
I guess, they wouldn't have been like pixie heads wouldn't quite be as threatening and saying, well, the pixie heads are going to come and put the king back in power.
Things might have turned out differently, though, if they were called the pixie heads.
I agree with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But thank you for enlightening me on the Roundheads.
Sure. I knew it had been really eating at you.
Oh, so, I know. I lay awake at night thinking about Roundheads and fat faces.
Again, don't know what fat face is. I guess that's the next thing I need to look up.
Well,
it's
it was
the name
a store.
Of a store. But why? There has to be a reason they decided fat face was a good name.
You're going to end up having to email them to ask the owner of the company.
Dear Fat Face, why?
Just make sure you send it to the right address.
Oh, no. Oh, that could be mean. Okay, fine. Okay, I'm going to talk about this one, actually, because just the other night, I love it when I'm just looking for something to watch and something comes up in the guide called Secrets of the Dead, The Prince is in the Tower.
Oh, there you go.
That's right up my alley.
That's like clickbait.
Yeah, exactly. For clickbait for Anglophiles. So yeah, it was on PBS, and I, of course, had to find out what that was all about. So it was Phillipa Langley produced and starred in. Now, if you remember, Phillipa Langley is the amateur historian who basically led the expedition to find the remains of Richard III and succeeded.
Okay.
A few years ago. So now she is making her way as a historian to disprove anything anti-Richard III, I guess. Which, kudos. So Philippa decided they set it up as her going to the office of this defense attorney, I guess, or forensic attorney, a very well-known one in England, and his name is Robert Render. And so it was set up as she's going to his office and saying, here, I want you to help me examine this evidence and tell me if you think it is enough to prove whether or not the princes in the tower were murdered.
All right.
Okay, so the princes in the tower were the sons of Edward IV. Edward IV? Yes. They were like 12 and 8 at the time, and they were sent there they were sent to the Tower of London after their father died, supposedly in protection of their uncle, Richard III, who was then the Lord Protector or the Royal Protector. I can't remember. But anyway, so he was running the country until the oldest one was old enough to become king.
Okay.
And they suddenly disappeared. Oh. And everybody thought that Richard III killed them. Okay.
Yes, or had them killed.
Had them killed, yes.
Yes.
And so that has been, that is what most people have always thought about. So, and of course, as somebody from the Richard III Society, Philippa will do anything to prove his innocence because there's a whole movement to unvilify Richard III. So she goes to this guy and she's I haven't seen any of this evidence yet, but it's very exciting and I want to see it. And I want you to come with me to see it. To use your legal eye to decide whether or not that is enough evidence. Okay?
Okay.
So first, I want to start by saying that I was very preoccupied through the whole thing because the narrator sounded exactly like Leonard Nimoy. And like when he used to do...
In Search of
with Leonard Nimoy. Very specific sound.
Yes.
And whoever this was doing Leonard Nimoy. I was like, how can that be? And I looked when it was recently done and Leonard Nimoy died in like 2014 or something.
Yes.
So it can't be. So I had to stop watching it and Google who was doing the voice. And it's an actor named Jay Sanders. Neither here nor there, but it was distracting. So if any of you want to watch it, that is not Leonard Nimoy, but definitely a Leonard Nimoy sound-alike. All right. So they go on this journey to see all of this evidence that she apparently had never seen before. It's amazing to me that they would have cameras rolling if she hadn't even seen them yet, was seeing them for the first time, but whatever. And most of the evidence was records that had been uncovered by a Dutch research team. Okay. And a lot of them, and most of them were just things that were handwritten. One of them was a receipt for...
Chicken McNuggets.
Yes, a receipt for Chicken McNuggets. No, a receipt from some royal person for weapons or something because they were building an army and it would be reimbursed as soon as the king, either Richard or what was the other one?
Edward.
Richard and Edward, yes, was back on the throne, like within 2 weeks of being back on the throne. So that implied that they knew who it was and he was behind some kind of rebellion and they were supporting him.
I see.
That was one thing. Another thing was... there was something that was written that in the voice of the younger prince of you keep saying the right name, and I keep for Edward, the younger prince, retelling the story of how he got to where he was, and talked about all of his travels, and he was being taken to places, being protected, and blah blah blah. And he ended up with his aunt in France, who was Edward IV's sister, Margaret. I think it was Margaret of Anjou.
Okay, well, can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
So if you're trying to protect somebody, and maybe I don't know a lot about this time of history, but I would not say, your father just died, kids, and so to protect you, I'm going to put you in prison, which is what Tower of London was, right?
It was, but people were also sent there for their protection.
Okay.
So yes, you were definitely a prisoner, but some of the apartments there were quite nice. So you were under lock and key, but you had all of the, you had freedom to walk around. You had your own clothes. You were fed well.
Pay no attention to the screams in the hallway.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Well, that was in the White Tower where all that stuff happened, and they weren't in the White Tower yet, I don't think, but that's a whole other story. So I'm not going to go over everything, the evidence that they had. But basically, in the end, you can watch it, you guys. It's on PBS. I'm sure it's called Secrets of the Dead, The Princes in the Tower. It'll be easy to find if you have any kind of video on demand. But the conclusion was that, yes, he decided that it was indeed enough evidence to prove that the princes had indeed survived the Tower of London, and one had gone off. The older one had gone off and had supposedly become somebody named Perkin Warbeck, who did die in some battle at some point as Perkin Warbeck, but he was the older prince. The only other evidence supporting that they died, other than the fact that nobody ever saw them again, was that I think 200 years ago, the skeletons of two boys were found under a staircase in the Tower of London.
Uh-huh.
And it was after some examination, whatever you can do 200 years ago, they had decided that they were the princes, and they had buried them as the princes. But it could have been two other boys who had died in the Tower of London. Who knows? I would like those bones exhumed.
Yeah.
And why can't that happen? Well, and also, since the discovery of his remains, he was actually reinstated as an honorable member of the royal family.
Oh, there you go. And he's got a great play named after him. That
was written by Shakespeare. That was not flattering to him.
No, but I mean, how many people know a lot of the other kings throughout history? If Shakespeare had written the play. Well, the only
reason we know any kings is really Shakespeare. If you think about it.
Well, but perhaps the people in England might be taught in schools.
Some of them.
It's their history.
I don't know. I feel like I maybe know as much as some British school kids at this point.
Maybe.
Maybe more than some British school kids, because they probably don't care.
You know what I know?
It's time to break?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Genes Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All righty. So we're back. I have an In the Trenches, an interesting In the Trenches for you guys today. I have stepped back from my business as a genetic genealogist a little more since I started working my regular salon job. Mm-hmm. Which I actually enjoy a lot because it's so different from everything else that I do.
I bet.
And yeah, it was a really good move for me, just for me as a human. But we all know I love doing genetic genealogy, and I still do it professionally, but I've been offering my services pro bono quite a bit lately because it feels good to be able to help people that couldn't afford me otherwise.
Right.
So I've picked up a few lately, and I just solved one that's really interesting. And she gave me permission to talk about it, of course, without revealing names or anything. So I'm going to call her Olive, which will henceforth be known as the female version of Orville.
Okay.
Olive contacted me and said that she is trying to find out who the father of her 15-year-old son is.
All right.
So,
and she's an adoptive mother?
No.
Oh, she is the birth mother.
He is her biological son.
Oh, okay.
So her son was conceived when she was deep in addiction.
Okay.
She was very, very much... she told me she was homeless a lot of the time. She was addicted to many substances. And the birth of her son basically put her on the straight and narrow, got her in the program, and she's a completely different person now.
Okay.
There were two people that she thought could possibly be her son's father, both tested, and neither were. So she was at a loss. Now, the son is only 15. She is in therapy with him, and he has a therapist. The therapist has advised that to wait to tell him all this stuff. I mean, I know he knows a lot of it, but apparently he doesn't know that the person he thought was his father is not his father. I'm not sure. I didn't, ask too much more into it because it's really not my business.
Right.
But she just really wanted to be able to provide answers going forward for her son when he wanted them.
Which is the right thing to do. Absolutely
it is. So I got to work, and pretty quickly I found a cluster of people very closely related to her son that in fact lived in the town that she lived in at the time. I was able to confirm 2 grandparents, and they had 4 sons. And at which point I contacted her, and 3 of them had Facebook pages, and I sent her the link to the Facebook pages. And she's like, he doesn't look familiar. Nope, I don't know him. That doesn't look familiar. The name was very common. So she started going off on that name. I'm like, the name is not going to mean anything.
Right.
Just somebody with that same last name that you knew, if they're not related to these people, it's not a name, it's the DNA.
Yeah, and if she was heavily into addiction, she may not have the memory of someone's name.
Of course, and she realized that, but it was blowing her mind that she didn't realize any of them, recognize any of them.
I bet. Well, yeah.
Yeah. But a couple of days later, she sent me this picture of one of the brothers, and I hadn't been able to find his Facebook page because I think he might be estranged from his other members of his family because he wasn't connected to them. That's usually. And he said, this is bio, the only blank brother I recognize and absolutely know I was with.
Huh.
So she's like, all right, that's him. I messaged him, and she sent me a side-by-sides of the father and the son. I see it. She said she doesn't see it, but he looks a lot like her too, but I can certainly see it. So I was like, great. And at that point, because it was pro bono, I was like, okay, off you go. Good for you. Tell me how it all turns out, And so I decided I wanted to tell the story, but I wanted to get her permission. So I asked her about it and asked if there were any updates. And she said, I've talked to so-and-so, and it's overwhelming for him. He thinks her son doesn't look like him, but understands he looks like her, like I said. So she has a DNA test on the way to him, and he should be getting it soon. So he is taking the DNA test.
And to confirm, you found him because you somehow linked the child or the child's DNA?
The child's DNA matched his parents.
His parents, okay.
Matched the families of both of the father's parents.
I see.
So I got relatives on the mother's side and relatives on the father's side, and checked to see if there were any other sibling marriages within
Yeah.
Those two families, and
Gotcha.
as far as I could tell, weren't. So at that point, I'm 99% sure that I'm right.
Yeah,
that
and
it's one of those.
she remembers him. So,
Well, she remembered him after she saw the picture, I guess.
right.
So he was the only one whose page I hadn't found.
Yeah, and also seeing a picture of somebody 15 years later, or 16 years later.
It's so funny. It's only 15 years. For me, it's like, that's nothing.
I know, but people change in terms of like how they look in 15 years, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, yes. So I can't wait to hear how it all turns out. He will either be a half uncle or his father. No, an uncle or a father. And we'll know. So
wow, that'll be interesting to find out. And then maybe if and when she tells her son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an odd time especially for boys, as far as identity goes and stuff like that. It's a different timeline for boys.
And we don't know, I would assume that the psychologist or whoever, the therapist that they're seeing has a good reason for asking her to, not bring this up at this time, depending on what's going on in the kid's psyche.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. We don't know. We're not in there.
Like we don't want to add insult to injury.
So, and I haven't given her name, but if she listens to this, kudos for her for turning her life around and being such a positive role model for her son. And she really is out there doing good things for people. So I'm happy I was able to help her.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Shall we take a break?
I think we shall.
Thank you for listening to CutOff Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/CutOff Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
All right, guys, this is the final installment. It's art. The final installment of Walking in the Footsteps of My Ancestors, which I did this past August. All right. So where we left off, I was in Bristol.
Yes.
I think I talked about that and going to St. Mary's Church. Yes, I did. And then we went and spent a couple days in Bath, which was swell. Then we went to Oxford, which is where my brother's friends are, the people that loaned us their car.
Twice.
Twice. And hung out there for like a day and a half. I've never been to Oxford before. So we walked around. When we got into town, we had lunch with a friend of Rob's, and we walked around the college or the university itself. Oxford is not its own college. It's a series of colleges. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not like Oxford is the town.
Do you watch the
Oxford
PBS?
Murders?
No, the PBS series Endeavor. It takes place at Oxford.
Yes, that's in Oxford. Yes, exactly. So they're all different. There's all these ancient buildings, and they're all several different universities. And I decided Rob's friends, lovely friends, invited me to stay at their house, but I opted to stay at a nearby pub because I feel weird imposing on people, and I also am very much someone who likes my space. So all the people that he knows in Oxford are a part of a cricket club that is the sister cricket club of my brother's cricket club in Australia. So they travel back and forth and play. And so in fact, they just recently went to Tibet and played since this last summer.
Wow.
So the whole team joined us for dinner at a local pub. And I got to meet everybody and tell the story I don't know how many times, but it was really nice meeting people and also seeing these people understand and appreciate the goodness of my brother as well. And it's, which is not surprising because he is such a great person. He's just one of those people. He's a mensch. And it was really nice to meet these people. And the next day was a big cricket match and my brother was playing. But I slept in, and then Trudy, one of the wives, actually the lady who owns the house that he was staying at, came to pick me up to take me to the game. And she said, well, why don't I just take you around town first? I was like,
that's so sweet.
Okay. So we went to this lovely like garden center, has this beautiful nursery with this wonderful restaurant and a gift shop. I can't remember what it was called.
Fat Face.
It was called Even Fatter Face because of all these baked goods.
It's a chain.
It's a chain. Fat Face is a chain, by the way.
Oh,
but they're
okay.
not a restaurant. So we did that. And then she's like, well, why don't I take you to this other little town? Do you like Downton Abbey? And I said, well, yes, I like Downton Abbey. And she said, I'm going to take you somewhere special. Now, I was concerned about this because I didn't want to miss Rob playing cricket.
Yeah.
But then she reminded me that a cricket match takes at least 6 hours.
Oh my God.
I had completely forgotten about that. Yeah, it's a whole social extravaganza that takes, it's like so many innings and, so you can come and go as you please. So by the time we got there, it was only halfway over.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we went to backtracking, she took me to this little village that is used for all of the exteriors on Downton Abbey.
Must be beautiful then.
It was so charming. So we went, the first thing that I saw was the house that is, I think, the Dowager's house.
The Dowager Countess, otherwise known as Maggie Smith.
Exactly.
Otherwise known as What is a Weekend?
What is a weekend? I just rewatched like the very first episode of Downton Abbey just this last weekend.
Or you could just watch Gilded Age and it's just basically Downton Abbey in New York.
Yeah, but it's not as good.
I know, but it's a guilty pleasure. I'll just say
it is. Yeah, it is. And there are a lot of theater actors in it.
Oh, I love it. It's like, there's a Tony Award winner playing the Scullery Maid.
Yes, exactly. Or you know what? Most of the like Tony Award winners are playing the lesser roles. They're playing the poorer people.
Yeah, they're like big stars on Broadway, and they're playing literally like little walk-on poor people. Servants.
Well, some of them are regulars, but they're definitely the downstairs.
Yes.
Anyway, so yes, we do. So that was very cool. And everything looked vaguely familiar just from all the exteriors you see on Downton Abbey. And then the church we went to was another ancient church from like the 12th century. That is the church that was used in Downton Abbey. All of the weddings were there. All of everybody's seen it. So that was a really nice little side trip that Trudy took me on. And then we went to the cricket game and had a great time. I will say that Trudy decided that I needed to drink the special gin that they had they have a clubhouse there, and the wives supply the food for the players from the other team. And
don't blame Trudy for your drinking.
I'm blaming Trudy. This is on Trudy. She's like, you have to. It was called the sacred gin, and I'm like, why is it called the sacred gin? I will say that by the end of the night, the three, us and one other lady, who was the lady who took me to the bus station the next day, we drank the whole thing, and I felt nothing.
Oh, were you like Morales in Chorus Line?
Exactly. I was. No. Well, so she texted me the next day and says, how are you feeling? A bit hungover? I'm like, not at all. In fact, I never felt even tipsy last night. Huh. And she said, well, it is a session gin.
What does that mean?
You know what?
No.
It's like a session wine that apparently, or a session beer, apparently they are lower in alcohol.
Then the point is...
I don't know.
Like, then just drink fruit juice, like, I don't know.
I know. I was like, well, then of course. It was watered down gin.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So whatever. It was fun. Yeah. And I felt like I was being naughty, but I really wasn't. I was drinking water. Next day, oh gosh, I can't remember her name. I'm so sorry. I'll put it on the Facebook group. Another friend offered to take me to the bus station to London, which is called the Tube, even though it's not a train. And she said most people that live in Oxford take the Tube into London because it costs money to drive your car into the city now. You have to pay a tax, an emissions tax.
Yes, they're going to start doing that in in New York. If you go,
Are they?
And I don't know that it's emissions. It's more about trying to it's about congestion. It's like a policy during certain hours of the day. If you drive into Midtown Manhattan,
interesting.
They're going to clock your car and you have to pay.
Well, it's definitely presented as an emissions thing, and they do it in Bristol as well. But so anyway, so I took the bus into London and made my way to the Trebevere Hotel.
Okay.
The Trebevere Hotel was a hotel that I'd booked right before the beginning of my trip, obviously. And I think I mentioned this before, but it happened to be the address of the boarding house that my biological father lived at in 1965.
Yes.
Before he went back to Australia.
Yes.
That was the address on the letter.
We're coming full circle here. Yes.
I was coming full circle. So I made my way to the Trebevere in Earl's Court, went there, the room, I checked in, and I was like, and I, of course, told the 20-year-old that was checking me in that my father had stayed there in 1965, and he looked at me like I had two heads. So I wasn't going to get anywhere with him. But I checked into my tiny room. When I say tiny, I could not open my suitcase fully.
Wow.
In the room, and it had a little single bed. That was not comfortable. In hindsight, I probably should have asked for another room. But I kept thinking that everything was happening for a reason, so I should just go with it. But it was fine. It was an efficiency. It was charming. It's an old Edwardian building, and all of the houses, buildings on Trebevere, are like old Edwardian houses that have been turned into hotels.
Okay.
Apparently, actually. So that's where I was for the last 3 days. So one day I walked. On the biggest day, I took. From Earl's Court Station, I went to the other side of town. It was where my second great aunt had lived with her husband, who had drowned in the Regent's Canal. So I wanted to go to the exact spot where they had lived. There is a lock there called Johnson's Lock, that he was the lock keeper for like 20 years. And he and his wife and several of their children lived right next to the lock, and that was his job. So I walked along. I took lots of video. I've made TikTok videos about it. So if you really want to get a grip on what I was doing, guys, just go to my TikTok. So I walked along there. I found the lock. I took a lot of video of the water that he drowned in. And, was just doing it. Well, was going to the places that I've researched.
You walked in the footsteps of your ancestors.
Of my ancestors.
Well, no, that's why you went.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
That's why I went.
And to see your brother and be with your brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of those things. Yes.
Yeah.
Then I walked like another 2 miles, and I found the land that same second grand aunt had lived with her daughter in 1911 when she worked for the church that was there. And she'd lived, and what was the housing for the people that worked at the church is now a private park. And I sat in the middle of that private park and just kind of was like, well, here I am. My people were right here.
Until somebody threw you out of it because it was a private park.
Until somebody said, what are you doing here? Yeah, nobody did. Then I went to King's Cross and took the tube to Camden Town, walked through the market, walked along the canal. Again, this canal zigzags through the whole city, and found the abode of yet another one of those sisters who was another Edwardian or Georgian house. And so I got there. And there were a few other places I could have gone to, but, just that one day I walked like 6 miles.
Wow.
And was like, all right, I think I've done it. I think I am done. But it was really wonderful. And I have all this wonderful footage and these memories. The next day I decided, my very last day in London, I was going to do something traditionally touristy. And I got tickets for Kensington Palace. They're having a special exhibit, I think a costume exhibit. And I was so excited to get tickets for it. I got there and they looked at my ticket and said I'd bought it for the wrong day and wouldn't let me in.
Oh, no.
So I never got to take my Kensington Palace tour, never got my money back.
Oh.
And, so I just wandered around London for the next day. And funnily enough, my friend Amy, who the listeners know because she's done a couple of, the patrons know because she's done a couple of the After Dark episodes on Patreon with me. She was there dropping her daughter off for her semester abroad, and we both forgot that the other one was there and forgot to reach out. So that last day I could have called her and we could have gotten together for dinner or something.
Oh, that's too bad. I thought you were going to say you ran into her. That would have been so crazy.
No, I wanted to, but it had been so long since I'd spoken to her and I was so tired. It just completely slipped my mind that she was going to be there.
Wow.
So that was my last day there. I went and had my last fish and chips and my last pint. The next morning I got up, I packed, I went to the Earl's Court subway and went directly to the airport from the Earl's Court subway. So it cost me $3 to get to the airport.
Wow, that's great. I wish we could do that in LA.
I think they're trying to do that.
I know.
I don't know. Yeah. So that, my friends, is the end of walking in the footsteps of my ancestors.
And thus the end of our podcast. I am Richard Castle. You can follow me on X, on Instagram, @CastleSongs, or you can go to my website, richardcastle.com.
I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. You can go to cutoffjeans.com and find everything Julie Dixon Jackson or Cutoff Jeans. You could follow me on X, but I don't ever do anything on there.
Yeah.
But I am on TikTok more than anything else and Instagram. So, if you feel like it, follow me over there.
Do you have any last words, Julie, for the podcast listeners?
I do have last words. The truth is in your jeans.